And I remember that he had received a spiritual message about 6 months earlier telling him that he needed to go to Four Corners to ascend. So that might have had some reason why he went to Four Corners. It might have had something to do with the completion of his ascension, of getting, the alignment of that portal he was created in his body and his soul selves. And so Marcus guided him to take or Marcus was in the body. I'm not sure how Joe's consciousness was blipping in and out of his body. I know Joe's was blipping in and out of his DNA in his body, because then the airplane, he had the airplane fly him back to Monterey. But as soon as the airplane reached Monterey, he got back into the airplane and flew back to Bakersfield again, where he had left his car. Then as soon as he got to Bakersfield, he got in the car and he drove to Mount Shasta. So some reason the angels were directing him to Mount Shasta. And so I was also communicating with these angels, and they were the ones telling me to locate him through the credit card and find out what was going on. And then Marcus and the angels, the Elohim angels who had taught me how to do the music, and Zorok and the Maharaji, Sirius B, the Pleiadians, the Loims, all of these angels came to me that night and said, I don't think that there is any way to get Joe back to his body. I don't think you'll ever be able to see him again, and if you ever met with his body, this body would have no memory of you, because Joe is not there anymore. Joe has switched places, and if you ever want to see Joe again, the only thing that we can do is arrange to have his body laid down horizontally for a few months to get his consciousness, to get his soul back into his body. Or not his soul. His soul was staying in his body. Souls never leave the body. So his connection through his higher self to the other side, into the mind of God, to get that Joe to come back into the body, they needed to do this event with his body. So the next morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call from the Mercy Hospital in Redding telling me that they have my husband's body. And I am told that he had been hit by a 10-ton truck. There was confusion because it looked like there had been one 10-ton truck that had kind of blown him into the street, and another 10-ton truck saw him kind of flying into the lane. The truck hit him and threw him across to another lane, and then 5 cars ran over his body. That was the story given by several people who were there at the time. And the story that the angels told me while this event was happening, they said, don't worry about any stories that you hear from the doctors or anybody, because what's really happening is we're creating a hologram of Joe's body, laying it across the freeway, and then we're going to beam his body up to a spaceship, up through the portals of Mount Shasta, where that is an entrance and exit point for the Lemurians and Pleiadians spaceships. He will be escorted onto a spaceship through his orb body, and that's where we will begin operating on him. So the reason that this body that had been hit by these 10-ton trucks and thrown clear across the freeway, and his body was broken up, and there were 10,000 broken bones in his spine, and his leg had been ripped off, and his head was cracked open in half. The reason that body appeared to be alive was because Marcus was still in his body. So Marcus stayed in his body, his soul was still in his body. So this needed to appearance of reality that seemed like Joe was dead and in a coma, and all of these things that the doctors thought was going on was not really what was going on. The angels told me, don't worry about anything you see in the hospital, because this is just all a hologram that we prepared for people to see Joe's body while we take him up into a spaceship and work on him. So I said, okay. So when I arrived at the hospital, I chose to believe what the angels told me rather than what the doctors told me or what its appearance told me. And so when the doctors told me that my husband was in a coma that he would never come out of, and there was no way of saving him, and they were going to begin draining his blood because he was already dead, I told them to get out of the room, and I put the earphones on his head, as the angels told me to, because those frequencies that we had prepared are the highest frequencies of consciousness of our spiritual self standing on the other side of the veil that we recorded. I took those frequencies, put them on Joe's head, and then those frequencies went into his frequency-specific midbrain, where they were playing these highest beautiful strings of the cosmic orchestra, reconnecting with his secondary consciousness, sending those frequencies up to his self on the other side of the veil, while his holographic body was being laid there. Reconnected the Joe on the other side of the veil back into his body. So that is when Joe, that holographic body, woke up. So I knew that the angels were playing some magic tricks of this holographic body laying in the hospital was not really the one that woke up. The one that really woke up was the one on the spaceship. So I wasn't very worried about the body in the hospital. But the other body that they were operating on, they said they still needed me to bring his consciousness back into his body, bring the Joe consciousness back. So this was the beginning of bringing the Joe consciousness back. Marcus was still in the body that was in the hospital. Marcus was there making sure that body was not experiencing any pain, and basically it was like it wasn't even there. And there was this entity talking to me the whole time that I was together with him in the hospital, and he never wanted any painkillers. He didn't need any help. He was just very happy. He was always very happy and joyous, and telling me these stories of his adventures on to the other side, and adventures of how everything really happened through history, and telling me that they had written all of the stories about past histories all incorrectly, and it was all very interesting. And I tried to stay awake for the stories, but usually this being started telling me stories at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I usually had to leave the hospital by then. And so I was never worried about what was going to happen to this body, because the angels told me what was really going on. And so this being was in this body. He was always not really in his body. He was always really about 3 feet out from his body, in his Marcus self, in his higher self body. And he wasn't really feeling anything that was going on in the body. And then finally, when we left the hospital about a month later, and we moved into my mother's house, and this other entity was still in that body, until about 1 month later, one day, Joe rolled over, looked at me, and said, "Hi, I'm Joe." And he said, the angels told me to tell you thank you, because they couldn't have done this without you. And so that was the story of Joe coming back to his body after going through this death experience. So what we perceive on this earth isn't the whole reality of what is going on. What seems to be people dying, or people leaving their bodies, or people in comas, usually means that their higher self has taken them on a journey to the other side of the veil, and they're having a great time. And then after they leave and they go see how wonderful everything is, they hear these voices calling them from their friends and their family, and praying and asking them to come back into their body. And so they come back down, and they hit their body. When they hit their body, it just feels, it's so painful and so horrible. And then they remember how wonderful it was on the other side. And then they decide that they really don't want to come back to their body. And that's when the soul makes the decision whether or not to leave the body. So the secondary consciousness can leave the body, go clear back to source, go clear into all these multidimensional versions of reality for as long as it wants to. It can be days, it can be weeks, it can be years, it can be lifetimes, it can be as long as they want to. So when people are in a coma, it means that their higher self, their secondary consciousness, has taken a trip to the other side. And then the soul, as long as the soul waits in the body won't die. And then if the secondary consciousness comes back to the body and decides that they really don't want to come back to this earth, they just really want to stay on the other side, then the secondary consciousness tells the soul, nah, it's time to close down. And then the soul decides, the soul is going to leave. When the soul decides to leave, then all of the cells in the body shut down, and the cells explode, and the body is gone, and there's no return after that. But as long as the soul stays in the body is still alive, whether it appears to be gone or not. It's just a body laying there with the soul watching over it. But as long as this body is really the soul, as long as the soul is in the body, that entity is there. And that entity and all of their experiences of all of their lifetime, all of their knowing is there. And that's what interconnects with the secondary consciousness, and what makes the decision of whether the body wants to have a new experience or not. And why is all this so important to know at this time? This is the time in the history of the human race when we are to learn that our reality and the reality of everyone we see around us is truly that spiritual self on the other side of the veil. All of these people that we see are not just these 3D consciousness of mortals with all of these limitations and problems. They are truly the spiritual self on the other side of the veil that just waits 3 feet above their head to take this journey back into that spiritual parallel universe of reality, of creation, where we came from, to come down and have this experience. And we need to learn not to be so hard and judgmental with people, because in reality they are exactly the same as we are. They are exactly the same light and sound energy in the cosmic sea of love that we are. When we go to the other side, we see everyone is this ocean of love, and that symphony of love that we hear playing through our ears right before we go down that tunnel through our silver cord that takes us through our higher self into the other side, into the spiritual reality, which just means antimatter, which means what we can't see now. Spirituality is now it needs to be changed from the word spirituality to antimatter. It has to be changed into a scientific understanding of what we're changing to is matter, from matter to antimatter, from what seems to be visible to us into what seems to be invisible to us. But we can change what is invisible to us just by using technologies of light and sound to transform what we can see and what we can't see. So this is just all a holographic illusion created by how we use light and sound, what realities we see or don't see. So when we go through that tunnel of light to the other side, we see all of the things that we couldn't see before. And all these things that we can't see are, in fact, the reality that is right here within us. It's only 3 feet away. All we do is look out in front of us and we see the spiritual reality of the kingdom of heaven right here on earth. But each one of us has to see that individual version of reality that they see when they go up their violet string up into the cosmic core and then beyond into the mind of God. So many people have practiced the spiritual ascension process, the near-death experience. Most people didn't do it like my husband, where they turned into a ball of light and disappeared and went to the other side and then got hit by a 10-ton truck, laid in a hospital, and then had to come back several months later into their body. Most people just get hit on a head or get in a car accident and they die, and then they go down a tunnel and then they go into a coma and they wake up a while longer. But in fact, they're doing the same thing. They're traveling through that tunnel of light to the other side. They're coming face to face with their spiritual parallel self. And then after seeing and feeling a total different reality, they're bringing that reality back into this reality. And reality just means frequencies of consciousness. So that is what's happening on Earth right now. We are all shifting to these higher frequencies of consciousness where we can see the new reality. We can see the realities in these spiritual parallel universes. We can see this reality that exists in this cosmic ocean of love within the mind of God. We have access and ability and technology given to us now to be able to do these things. And we have the process and the technology to learn to turn our bodies into a sphere of light and disappear. As a matter of fact, our government, our deep government, the Majestic 12 and those related to it, have known this technology of how to turn their bodies into a sphere of light and orb into other places on Earth or onto other planets. They've been doing this for decades within our government, and our government has been taking trips to Mars several times a year or even several times a day because they have the technology to automatically transport their bodies through an elevator that they created through these technologies, which were given to Earth long time ago by other starry entities like the ones that I talk to, like Zorok and Marcus, and these entities of light with this extremely high intelligence. All of this stuff already exists on Earth. And what is supposed to happen in 2016 is that all of these secrets that the government has been keeping from us, such as their trips to Mars and their being able to turn into orbs of light, is supposed to be returned to the people on Earth in 2016. But if they don't return that information, I'm giving that information to you right now. And to learn how to turn into an orb of light, to learn how to ascend through the portals of light on to the other side of the veil. You can learn more through my other audio books, my books titled 12 DNA Music of the Spheres, The Matrix of Illusions. I am making several audio books on DNA reprogramming, and any of the Ascension books by Dr. Angela Barnett. And you can learn more by coming to crystalmagicorchestra.com, the Cosmic Mystery School of the Omniverse.com. Become a member of that and have access to all of my training materials.